I'm Susie Hess.
And I'm Yehuda Price. This is Our Stories Matter.
So welcome back to Our Stories Matter. Today we have Brendon Woods. Brendon Woods was appointed in December 2012. He is the first Black Chief Public Defender in Alameda County's history and is currently the only Black Chief Public Defender in the state of California. Woods has 20 years of experience in criminal defense litigation and leads 170 staff in providing superior legal defense in more than 3,000 new files monthly. Woods is committed to providing holistic representation to his clients and is a nationally recognized leader in public defense. He is a board member and former president of the California Public Defenders Association and was honored with the Harvard Law School Wasserstein Public Interest Fellowship for outstanding public service. From a young age, Brendon Woods had formative experiences with law enforcement, steering his life and career towards public defense. He feels fortunate to fight for those battling systems of oppression and strives to reshape the discourse and nature of public defense and criminal justice as a whole. So welcome, Brendon.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So good to be in this space with you, Brendon. Knowing, I know a lot of our listeners may have gleaned what a public defender is from watching TV shows, or maybe they do have their own personal experience with that. But I want, if you can inform our listeners, what is a public defender and why does it matter?
Sure. So a public defender, we all have heard those Miranda warnings, right? If you cannot afford an attorney, want to be appointed to you, we are those attorneys. And the reason we matter is because we represent those people who are charged with crimes and they do not have the money or means to hire private counsel. Now, it goes back to this Supreme Court case called Gideon versus Wainwright, which is really kind of a fascinating and funny case because you go back in our history, even though the Constitution guarantees a right to counsel, historically, it did not apply to all crimes or all misdemeanors or all felonies. So this guy named Gideon, he was arrested, I believe it was for some sort of theft case from a pool hall in Florida. And he stole like a nominal amount of money from a cigarette machine. And he went to trial. He asked for an attorney. The judge said, no, there is no right to counsel here unless you're charged with a death penalty case. So he went to trial, was convicted, lost. From his jail cell in Florida, he wrote his appeal requesting counsel. And that made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And they overturned it and they provided him with counsel. And so our right to counsel came from that case. And what's great from that case, he went back to trial, was appointed counsel, and was acquitted of the crime. So I can't really understate the value and need for public defenders. And I think historically, there has been this reputation that public defenders have. Reputation, they're words to describe us, public pretender, dump truck, terrible attorney. There's this historic connotation that, what you get for free must be terrible. And I do see part of my job and role as the public defender is pushing back against that stereotype and fighting against that. And I think that stereotype comes from a few different things. It comes from historically public defenders' services not being valued and not being funded. And I don't care how dedicated you are, how much of a fierce advocate you are, how much you care about the cause, how much you're going to fight for your clients. If you've got 400 or 300 cases sitting on your desk, you can't be a great lawyer. You can't fight for your clients. And so I see part of my role as the public defender is changing that narrative, changing that stereotype, not just with my office, but nationally and throughout the state of California, and making sure that we are properly resourced. And secondarily, that we are employing the right people to do the job. So I think being a public defender, public defender services are critical. And to take it a step further, we talk about it more. I see the work that we do as essentially being a war on poverty, that we are fighting poverty. Because if there is a rich person who is accused of a crime, they are treated so differently in our legal system as opposed to someone who has no money. That's why we're important. And that's what we do. Just to make sure we're clear. So I've been with the Public Defender's Office for over 20 years now, getting close to 25 years. Good God. And within my role as a public defender and the public defender, I represent people charged with all sorts of crimes. And our office does everything from people being charged with some crimes that I think should not even be crimes, like driving on suspended license or petty theft or possession of a low-level amount of drugs. Those are all crimes. So we represent people charged with those crimes, going all the way up to domestic violence, rape, assault, murder. Public defenders do all those types of cases.
Thank you. You kind of brought back memories of my experience with public defenders. And I'm not going to say I ever use any of those pejoratives that you mentioned. I'm not going to claim I've never have. Right. But I think you mentioned something when you said it's a war on poverty. I think it is a war on particular communities that don't have the resources to kind of invest in those sort of defenses once they have interaction with the justice system. And so when you have a public defender's office that is historically underfunded, especially in comparison to the DA, and if we're in an adversarial system, you are historically allowing for particular populations to be essentially in a gunfight with a knife, right? And so if you don't, if you're not investing in public defenders and public defender office in the people's side of an adversarial system, then it could definitely feel like that. So I'm glad you touched on that for our listeners who really don't know what the situation is.
Sure. And can I extrapolate that a little bit more? I love the analogy gunfight and a knife. It's almost like a gunfight and like a paperclip or an Uzi versus a paperclip. I mean, we're really at that level. And what people really don't understand as it comes down to priorities, and we still as a nation and country are so heavily focused on law enforcement, we feel this need that police officers and incarceration, what makes us safe, which really doesn't. We're still very focused on that. And the way budgets are set for public defender offices is through elected officials primarily. And they're still really concerned about policing and control and incarceration. And so I like to pull it back and think about, all these people are talking about, we need to end mass incarceration. We need to have racial equity and do this, but you've got to fund the people and the agency that's fighting literally to get people out of cages. You have one governmental agency that is really dedicated, that should be dedicated if it's being run properly to end mass incarceration. And historically, it's being funded $1 to $10, $1 for defense, $10 for incarceration, prosecution, and control. So I'm going on about this, but I really want to highlight it. Take, for example, in our county, in Alameda County, which is a liberal part of the state, my budget is almost half of the prosecutor's budget, half. So talking about, if we're doing sports analogies, it's like one sports team over here is paying their athletes, $500,000, and the other team that you're going against paying them $1 million. And then what's not factored into that is that in each county, there are numerous police agencies, which are also doing the job of the prosecutor. So the prosecutor says, how do you get this case investigated? They go to the police department. And so, for example, my budget's $40 million, which sounds large, but we compare it to the DA's office, which is like $90 million, and then Oakland Police Department, which is $300 million, the Sheriff's Department, which is $300 million, Fremont Police Department, which is $100 million. It's like all this money really dedicated to policing, incarceration, control, and in so many ways, hunting communities of color. We are in a serious uphill battle. And I do think that we're doing better than most because, as I said, we are a liberal part of the county, and we have a lot of great community groups in our county, a lot of activists here. We're in Oakland, but it is still a fight day in and day out just to get the proper resources for our clients.
Yeah. I mean, so you said so many things, and, I have so much admiration for your passion and your wisdom and, being out there. And I'm wondering, you talked about, in your bio, it talked about, having your own experiences with law enforcement. So I am wondering, what is your why for doing this work?
I love that question. What is your why? I always ask my incoming interns and attorneys, what's their why for doing this work? I think the why is critical. The why, I believe, helps you sustain this work. So being a public defender isn't an easy job. It gets heavy, it gets gritty, it gets emotional. It takes a mental toll on you, takes a toll on your family. And when it gets hard and difficult, you've got to go back to your why. Why are you here? Why are you advocating? And if you don't have a good why, you're not going to make it. You're just not going to make it. So my why, it's so many reasons for my why. I think my why goes back to how I was raised, what I saw growing up, and what I saw happening in my community. Just a little background. I am from Jamaica, Queens, New York. My family is a family of immigrants. We're from Jamaica, like, Jamaica, Island, Jamaica, Kingston. My mom, she was very young. I was the first person on my mom's side born in the States here. And my biological father was not around, not present. He had a whole different path, we'll say. I won't go into that too much. And so I think we were pretty low income. And I saw the impacts of the criminal legal system on other members of my family, most specifically some of my cousins after me in biological age. I saw one cousin when he was in college was beaten pretty badly by the police in New York, and his life went just a different path, had a traumatic brain injury, and then he was on federal parole, XYZ. It's just a whole different path for him. Another cousin had the onset of some mental health issues at the end of high school, going into college, and began self-medicate with marijuana, meth, other substances, and had a whole different path. About 6 months after I became public defender, I was appointed public defender. They found his body in San Francisco. Had been under the pier in the water, and it was not recognizable much. One of the uncles who helped raise me when I was a sophomore in college got sentenced to 27 years in state prison for armed bank robbery. So that's my why. I've seen the way this criminal legal system, criminal punishment system attacks communities of color. I've seen how it has attacked and not offered assistance or help to my family. And beyond that, I've had my own interactions with police over and over again, where it's clear they are not here to help. They're not here to protect and serve, unless they're protecting and serving their own, but there is no safety there. And I think as I am in my role as the public defender, as I'm fortunate enough to lead this office and create a vision and mission for this office, everyone we hire, everyone who works here, we make sure that they're on point with regards to, if you're going to be here, you're not going to treat the people you serve like inmates or prisoners or defendants or PFN members. We're going to fight for them and advocate for them like they're your brother, your cousin, your sister, your uncle. That's the way I want to see public defense practiced in our county and throughout the state, where we are fighting for people. We're advocating for people. We're going to the mat for people.
Super, super powerful. My gosh. It takes me a second, just like taking it all in terms of your own lived experience and being system impacted, which makes sense in terms of your passionate heartbeat in this work. And I even saw one of your Facebook posts, talking about what you're doing on the weekends. And then it's back to all the social justice work that you're doing on the weekends, which makes sense in terms of your heartbeat. And how do you feel that the criminal injustice, how do you feel criminal injustice activism has been healing for you personally?
That's a great question. I want to back up. I've been thinking a lot recently about what keeps people engaged in this work, how you can do it, what keeps you battling for 20, 25 years and keeps you from burning out, keeps you caring about clients and keep caring about people. And I think it's a balance of both, balance of a healthy amount of rage and then a healthy amount of compassion. So I am constantly angry at the system. I think I wake up angry, and the longer I do it, the more pissed off I get. It shouldn't be this hard to make people realize that putting human beings in cages is not working. It shouldn't be this hard to get judges and prosecutors to care about people and to see our clients as human beings. It shouldn't be this hard to get people to stop spending millions and millions of dollars on incarceration, but it is. It shouldn't be that hard to keep police officers accountable and to make sure that DAs and prosecutors follow the goddamn law. It shouldn't be that hard, but it is. So you need a healthy amount of anger and rage to combat that. But at the same time, you need a healthy amount of love and compassion for the people you represent. Because, we get to be angry and fight and do this and that, but they're going through the shit, okay? They're the ones going through the shit. We can have a spa day or go to the gym, but they're the ones being locked in the cages. Their families are suffering. Their kids are suffering. And so you've got to have that balance. One of my colleagues the other day, as we were talking about the subject, said, the rage is what gets you up in the morning and makes you go to work and makes you keep fighting, but the love is what keeps you here. And I think that's a great way of saying it. So I guess how's it been healing for me? Personally, I probably can't get enough of this work. Maybe it's in some ways for me addicting. It is being in the office in a lot of ways is my happy place. I see that there's so much work that has to be done. There's so much fighting that has to be done. There's so much change that has to occur. So this is my happy place. This is my zen, my joy is working and doing this work. I tell people who work for me that I'm not sure when I'm going to give up this seat. You have to pry my cold, dead hands out of this chair. Joking. But it's just, I love this work. I love what I do. And so maybe that's how it's been healing for me. I think growing up Black, growing up being disadvantaged, not having all the opportunities, but having some, and being in a position where you have more power and you're able to create change and you're able to hold, in some ways, those people who are really inflicting harm in our communities, hold them accountable is really great. And I really enjoy that work. Being able to shed some light on the massive abuse and harm that occurs in this criminal legal system that is necessary. It's a calling. And I truly love doing it.
I resonate with a lot of things you say. And when you speak about that rage, right, that rage that is necessary to me, it's like, it appears like liberating almost. I remember sitting in that courtroom for trial and just feeling like not rage at what was going on, but just like despair, like, because I had even if I had rage in that particular position, there's no outlet for it, right? Nobody's doing in that particular seat, in that particular position, you're not doing any criminal justice activism. You're a victim in a sense. You're passive at that point.
So I'm thinking about that. And that's unfortunate because you shouldn't feel passive at that point. If the person representing you, I think, is doing a good job, you should be active and engaged in the litigation and the trial. And it should be a team effort. And you should feel like you are fighting against every single fucking corrupt and racist person in that system. Okay. I mean, it should be a movement like that. So, I am the public defender, so I get to set policy and do legislation and also different changes. But the people on the ground, the public defenders who are fighting every day in the trenches, I think are the ones really making change because they're saying in that moment, I am here, I am fighting, and I am not going to let this system, part of my language, fuck over my client without a fight. So we're in it. And if we're doing it right, it's not just the attorney fighting, it's the attorney with the social worker, with the investigator, with the support staff, with immigration attorneys, with advocates, with the community, all bringing forth an effort to fight against the system which is not working. That's the way it should be. God, you guys got me fired up now.
I love your passion and the anger that fuels your passion, right? To dismantle and to make change. And I think, for myself, I was in the DV field for 20 years because that was my lived experience as well. And so my anger was fueled to making changes in policy within DV shelters. And I think that, it makes sense in terms, it goes back to your heartbeat. Your heartbeat is in it. So your rage of making change, I could only imagine would be super healing and empowering for the person that you're representing because they know you're all in. Versus it's clearly not just a job for you.
I don't believe this work can just be a job. If it's just a job, you shouldn't be doing it. You need to step aside and someone else do it. It is a calling, and you have to be all in. You have to find times and places to restore, recoup, and rest, but you have to be all in to do this work.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about, for Our Stories Matter, the healing piece, right? We don't want to get into the trauma porn. We really want to focus on the healing centered piece. And a lot of healing centered engagement is focused on the activism. So we've gone through all of this. Now, what can we do to find purpose in what we've already gone through? And how can we all rise up together from what we've already gone through? So I'm wondering, that's your question, Yehuda. I was jumping to yours. Oops.
Yeah, I was still soaking in what he said. And I just wanted to comment too, that the lawyer in particular I had was a paid lawyer. He ended up being determined ineffective assistance of counsel, right? Because of him being a dump truck, to quote another word you use, right? But I think when we have these negative stereotypes of what it is to be a public defender, people feel like, I don't want to deal with a so-called public pretender. Let me just go hire a lawyer. And many times they hire lawyers that are essentially just being an opportunist to find somebody in a vulnerable position and not necessarily looking out for their best interest. And that's what happens when, these stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate, like, public defender can't help. And when they're underfunded as well, and all that, like, it could really lead to a position where a person is led to trial because your lawyer advised you to go to trial, also knowing they get that extra payment to go to trial, as opposed to, a public defender doesn't necessarily have that sort of incentive, right? And so this is kind of how what the system perpetuates, though. And if people are not aware of all the different avenues of which the system can exploit you in different ways. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. And I also just want to throw out there, my dad immigrated from Jamaica, so, Jamaica in the house right quick.
That's right. That's super awesome. I'm curious, how is a person informed that a public defender is available? How does that happen?
So it probably differs depending on your county, but typically when you're arrested and you are arraigned on the charges are read to you in open court, you're asked if you can afford counsel. And if you can't afford counsel, you're then referred to the public defender's office. That's usually the way it happens and works in most counties and jurisdictions. And I do want to go back to that phrase or term, public pretender. I think if I'm doing my job correctly, hopefully in about 10 years, that term will no longer exist. That'll be something of the past. It'll be extinct. People won't have heard that term before. We'll change the tide of what it means to be a public defender.
That's ambitious for one, but I just say that again, knowing from my own experience what the view is. But I think we are. It might be ambitious, but I think the way the sort of racial reckoning going on in the United States and the people looking more so at the criminal legal system, criminal punishment system more, that we're definitely in that climate for that to happen. So I'm definitely encourage you to achieve all these dreams and visions that you have in mind. And it can be done. It's what you call a paradigm shift, right? We're living it. It's just not sustainable to do what we're doing. And you can't treat, and you touched on this previously, you can't treat people who get involved with the justice system as some sort of enemies of the system of people. We are people. We are the community. And it takes sort of a community approach to it as opposed to some crusading law enforcement agency or whatnot, feeling they need to solve everybody's problem by just locking up members of the community and separating families and, causing that sort of issues within the community that further perpetuate crime and all these other, sort of consequences of poverty. So, yes, more power to you. Please.
You said ambitious. I'm nothing short of ambitious. So probably a fatal flaw that I have. It's interesting. You said it's not sustainable to do it. I love that. But it's like, some people think it is sustainable, right? There's some people who absolutely want to sustain it. There's that inherent building blocks, building probably the right word, how this nation was constructed. And it's based on white supremacy and systemic racism. Those are all the building blocks right there. So there are people who really want things to stay in place, right? They want to sustain the hell out of this. They want to keep certain people oppressed. And there are people of color who don't have the means. So yeah, it's a battle. It's a fight. And I enjoy it. One thing I tweeted recently, which I want to put out there, is if public defenders were funded at the exact same level as prosecutors, it would be revolutionary. It would be revolutionary. To be able to give my office the exact same resources where I could just go in toe to toe with the DA's office is over. It's over. It's over. Okay. It would be just the amount of services we could provide. Caseloads would be low. We could have, instead of having 5, 6 social workers, we could have 20. We could be building treatment plans. We could be having civil attorneys to help with housing and employment. We could be bringing lawsuits against police departments and sheriff's departments when they violate our clients' rights. I mean, it would be revolutionary. So I always throw that out there. It's about will. And do people really, really want to see reform? Do they really want to see the system of mass incarceration deconstructed? Do they really want to go down the path of abolition?
Right. And the system, is not broken, right? It was created this way for this purpose. So it's doing exactly what it intended to do. So yeah, I think it can sustain because it continues to sustain unless communities rise up, which they have been. And we've been seeing that like in the past year, which has been pretty powerful. And I hope it doesn't sort of die down right? Until like a next social media video is posted. And I'm wondering, I know at the beginning you said it, but will you repeat it again? How much the prosecutors receive in their department versus public defenders?
It depends on the county, but I think it can be up to 2 to 1, just between prosecutors and yes.
Wow, my God. Yeah, again, it's doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I think to add to what he said, and he mentioned it, it's not just the inequitable allocation of funds between the prosecution and the public defender's office, but again, they have actual law enforcement as well in order to do investigations and help their particular investigations. So they have access to that doesn't necessarily appear right on the budget when we're talking about it, right? And it's and to go further to that, when he says when he mentioned about like people do want to see this system sustained because it's being sustained, and it's being sustained whether we're in conservative counties or we're in liberal counties. I mean, we're in California, it's super blue state, right? And we have the highest incarcerated population in the nation, right? So there are people committed to sustaining this for various reasons. But I think, this is as good as time as any to stop that. And kind of speaking to that as well, just knowing, the different sort of things that kind of occurred in the United States to create these sort of systems. But you also mentioned that, through the criminal injustice activism, how has it been healing for you? But also I want to say is, how does healing from the United States look like to you?
That's such a good question. It's like, I should break down what it looks like to me and what's possible. I'm going to go to what it looks like to me. One thing I've always said about fixing this broken system, which I know is something that can't be done, but having true racial equity or racial awakening across the lines, across the board. And so what I mean by that is, for example, I'm in Alameda County, Oakland Bay Area, and we have Santa Rita Jail in our county. Santa Rita Jail is huge. It is a monster. It is a humongous jail. It's the 3rd largest jail in California, the 5th largest jail in the nation. It can hold about 4,000 people. It is just humongous. The population of Santa Rita Jail right now is about 49% Black. Alameda County is 10% Black. Think about that disparity. So I wholeheartedly believe if I had a magic wand and I could flip the incarceration rates to match the racial diversity of those communities, you would have criminal justice, I'm going to use the word reform, over a fucking night, okay? Overnight. Things would change immediately. So when it comes to healing, in my mind, I'll just say I am an abolitionist. I do not believe in prisons. I do not believe they've done anything to help our communities. I do not believe they bring any form of safety or healing. I think that if we were serious, we would really revamp our system from head to toe. We have models that have worked, that we've seen work. For example, the Norway model, of course, where prisons aren't prisons. They're more akin to what I'm going to call city colleges with dorms, where people are getting life skills, they're getting treatment, they're getting treated in a different way. That society views punishment as simply being removed from the community, not all the other dehumanizing parts of being incarcerated. They don't do the same caging, putting 2 people in a cell that's 8 feet by 12 feet. They don't have someone go to the bathroom right in front of someone else. They don't make people get strip searched and wear the same clothes and feed them horrible food. It's just a different system in its entirety. And they're not sentencing people to life, right? They're not saying you are unworthy to come back to society for some minor bullshit offense. They're not doing that there. But we're doing that here because we are addicted to incarceration. We are addicted to incarceration. So when it goes to healing, U.S. healing, there's that huge incarceration piece, that huge piece right there. But then there's also got to be this real honest, deep discussion about race and the harm that has happened to communities of color, particularly Black communities in this nation, and how we have not dealt with it, we have not addressed it, and we have not gotten over it. I heard this the other day, and it was shocking to me, if it's true, that Biden was the first sitting president to go to Tulsa, the site of the massacre. I was like, holy shit, really? That is insane to me. That is insane. Where We didn't recognize that by a sitting president until the 100th anniversary. Come on, people. It's shameful. And, we had a quote unquote awakening last year, but we've only touched the surface. And the forces on the other side are digging in, right? They're digging in. They don't, the professor from North Carolina on 1619, that's insane. That's crazy. That is crazy. All she did was speak truth, and she's being punished for it. And we allow it still. So we as a nation, when it comes to healing, we are not prepared to address, acknowledge, and dig in deep around the racial harm that has occurred, particularly when it comes to slavery and lynching and just the harm and violence that has occurred to Black bodies here.
100%. I was watching a program about Norway, and then I was watching a program about the prisons in Germany. And going back to what you were saying, they don't have life sentences in Germany because they remember their history. They have benches that say never again. They're very intentional of not doing that again. And same thing with Norway. And I was seeing the housing at Norway. I mean, it was like community living, and it looked like IKEA. And it was really about, healing. It wasn't about how can we just be as inhumane as possible. And, so I hear you, and I totally agree 100% in terms of, I agree with abolition, and you can't start changing all of this that white supremacists built. So, yeah. And I'm wondering how you see community healing as political?
That's another great question. I think it depends in some ways on your community, right? I mean, I guess I'm fortunate to live in the Bay Area, to work in the Bay Area where there's so many robust and active community-based organizations which are really taking the lead and taking the charge and making sure that community voice is heard. So if I think about activism and community and healing, everything that I can think of that we've been able to accomplish legislatively here recently with our office has come from community. It's come from community ideas, community thoughts, community help. So I think making sure that community is active and has a presence and voice in decision-making is how you create that healing. And as we've seen, there are still these forces at work that are pitting community against community. They're still active in doing that, whether it be the rise in hate crimes and then the media and press are pitting Asian against Black. There's still that happening. And we have to be vigilant and realize the forces at work and how they really want to divide and conquer, and making sure as community, especially people of color, BIPOC community, that we are in lockstep and recognize that there are these forces that are really in place to keep us in this position of an underclass society.
I hear you on that. And kind of a question, like an extension of that question, I would say is, how do you see justice as community healing?
So I'll be honest. I really hate the word justice. I really have an issue with that word. And maybe it's not the word, but it's how justice historically has been defined in this country. I mean, justice in this country right now contains no healing, right? Justice in this country is based on the incarceration model. So when you look at incarceration, I want to be very clear about this point because people don't really see it or recognize it. But incarceration is violence. Incarceration is harm. Incarceration is suffering. And so you cannot use that tool of incarceration to create healing because you're doing the exact opposite. You are tearing people down. You are committing violence against them. You are destroying communities with that incarceration. So going back to, if justice is based on incarceration in this carceral system and being punishing, there can be no healing. There can be no healing. So we have to reimagine, I guess, or redefine what is justice. And I have a hard time doing that. I was judging, I'm going to go on a little tangent, a youth poet laureate competition yesterday, Alameda County's first youth poet laureate competition. And one of the young candidates talked about justice that's not working, the current carceral state, then talked about restorative justice, which is a little bit better. But then we got to get to a point where we have transformative justice. I was like, damn! I was like, damn, you go! And They were talking about how we need to completely transform how we're doing it. And justice should be about getting to the root cause as to why X person is here and then addressing it, getting into whether it's housing, job, employment, schooling, addiction, mental health, getting there, getting to that part. And then we can begin to see some sort of progress. So I guess if we can redefine justice in that way, I'm all about it. And that's what we should be doing. It's an interesting segue because I think it does tie into some of the work we've been doing in our office with regards to providing holistic defense, where we're bringing additional services, whether it be social workers, civil legal aid, really trying to bring in everything together to make sure we are attacking all of those consequences that come from involved in the criminal legal system or criminal punishment system. So that's probably the best way I can answer that question. It's interesting. Justice through healing. You need to redefine justice.
Well, thank you for giving that redefinition of what justice is or should be. And I think for a lot of these concepts, people don't truly understand. So you mentioned abolitionists. Abolitionists, that's what you are. A lot of people are like, oh, well, you just want to let everybody out of jail, right? And people try to jump on the defund the police. Oh, you just want to get rid of police and what's going to happen, this and that, right? And so for you to be able to explain justice, for you to be able to explain the abolitionist work you're doing. And so I also want to know, for everybody listening, what action steps can listeners begin to take if they would like to get involved with this abolitionist work you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think it depends. I keep going back to community groups. I think it depends where you're at. I think just honestly doing a Google search on criminal justice reform in your community and then connecting with those groups. So I'm thinking about statewide, there are some amazing groups, whether it be ARC in LA, or Ella Baker Center up here in Northern California, or SE Justice Group, also in LA and Oakland. There are all these community-based organizations that are doing really amazing work. So find out one that connects with you, dig in, support, volunteer, donate. That's where you should start. I mean, there are some really, really incredible groups and incredible people doing some really great work. I'm thinking of Urban Peace Movement up here, Courage. They're out there. And right now, it's really easy to tap into all of them, just doing a quick search.
Thank you so much. And you're doing it with USC Unchained Scholars, of bringing in students who were formerly incarcerated to your office for MSW internships, which is hella amazing. And it's interesting because even at USC, before this began in 2018, students were not being placed at abolitionist agencies. They were either getting in because they didn't do LifeScan, but it wasn't like they were being welcomed, that we appreciate and respect their lived experience, knowing the most attuned social workers are ones with lived experience. So I appreciate you in terms of, welcoming students who are formerly incarcerated and hosting them into an abolitionist thought process in the public defender's office, which I think is incredibly needed. So what has it been like to tell your story today?
It's been great. I'm not going to say healing, but it's So I actually really enjoy telling my story. I think it's like preaching the gospel of public defense. I want more people to hear about the work that we're doing and the work that has to be done. I want more attention and acknowledgement to this because I see it as being a real critical piece to reform. There's a lot of focus and attention being placed on progressive prosecutors. I mean, there really is this whole movement, and I'm not knocking them. I think it's important, but I always say this: at the end of the day, a cage is a cage is a cage. Okay, and if you are not actively trying to not cage people, I've got an issue. And even within the progressive prosecutor movement, I'm reluctant to give a ton of praise to people who are really just doing their job that should have been done since day one, right? So progressive prosecutors are known for prosecuting police officers. Every damn prosecutor should be prosecuting police officers. They should all be doing it. That's your damn job, okay? They're known for overturning wrongful convictions. Guess what? Every damn prosecutor should be doing that. They're known for, not charging bullshit, petty misdemeanor or marijuana cases. Guess what? Every prosecutor should be doing that. They're known for not sending people with drug possession or mental health issues to prison. Guess what? Every single prosecutor should be doing it. We should not be making them outliers. That should be the norm. You guys get me fired up today, man. Come on. So a lot of attention is placed on that. It is important, but we can't look at them as outliers. It's got to be seen as a norm. And maybe an outlier, which even shouldn't be, should be a revolutionary prosecutor, one who is really focused on abolition. That might be, the outlier, but shouldn't be, but it will be.
Thank you for sharing your perspective. I definitely appreciate that. And I think a lot of our listeners are going to listen up and understand that there's a lot of work to be done. And I want to apologize on behalf of any sort of derogatory remark I made against any public defender. And I say that tongue in cheek, facetiously, to say that I think a lot of times we criticize certain aspects of the system, and it's meant to be that way. So we're not actually having any scrutiny on the system itself, the system that underfunds public defenders' offices so they can have these pejoratives hurled their way. It's not, when you have, like you said, this sort of caseload, caused by underfunding, the skills and the necessary defense of those who are from impoverished backgrounds or who are meeting all sorts of barriers and, in their way of progress and healing, that we need the funding of that and that defense, especially when we're talking about an adversarial system. You don't just arm one side and then, like you said, give the other side a paperclip and says, yes, we believe in justice. And if they don't do their job, then they're just being a dump truck, So I appreciate you really highlight that and, all the different variables involved in the justice process and being a public defender. Thank you so much for leading the way. And I very so much encourage and hope for your vision, your ambition vision that I said to come in, to come into full effect. And I believe it can happen.
Yeah, so do I. Might take a little while, but yeah.
I love who you are, and I so appreciate who you are. And I wish you were not revolutionary. And I appreciate just so much of what you brought to the table. And I hope more folks, especially after listening to this podcast, will want to join forces so that it's not just a one-off, right, in terms of that thought process. So I so appreciate who you are and being so real and authentic. And that's healing. Just being real is healing. So I appreciate you.
Thank you. And I do think it's a movement right now happening in public defense at the moment. It's happening in California where we're being more aggressive with litigation. We're on the holistic track. We've adopted a lot from New York. And so, it's a time to make things happen and make some change.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be sending out a newsletter when your episode goes live with all of the resources that you threw out, the organizations in Southern and Northern California. We love ARC. So we'll add that too. But yeah, I look forward to future connections, hopefully in person up north or down here in the South.
Absolutely.
We'd like to thank our listeners. And special thanks to Arts in Action, part of USC Visions and Voices, the Arts and Humanities Initiative, for their generous support. Arts in Action, part of USC Visions and Voices, plants seeds for positive social change by activating intensive art projects between community partners, students, and faculty. Today's episode is written and produced by Susie Hess and Yehuda Price. Today's music is co-written and produced by Yehuda Price, utilizing a contraband cell phone while in prison. Our Stories Matter is brought to you by Trauma Informed LA. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Our Stories Matter and our website at traumainformedla.org. Please give us 5 stars on iTunes so more folks can have access and donate to traumainformedla.org so we can keep recording and healing through our storytelling episodes. Life is the life we live. Modern day slavery pursuing cheddar. Life is the life we live. Yeah. Whips and chains trying to duck the 12th letter. Mamas tell us be good, obey mass. So don't be like daddy all in the hood, okay, bastard.